Alright, so a few people have asked me to cover my hardware, so I wanted to just cover what I'm using today. Now this is something that I've grown into. So when I started, I really just had like a PC that I built. Well, actually I had a laptop that I just used. It's this one sitting right here. I just upgraded it with some more RAM and an SSD so it would run a little bit faster, and then I hooked it up through a wired connection and just left it open where it was running. So even when the power went out, it was nice because it had battery, so it continued to run, kept my services running, things didn't have to restart. It was great. And then I built a actual PC, which is down over this way underneath this desk, and I use it for my gaming now. But the most recent thing was last year we built, my dad, my wife, and myself, before my dad passed away, built this rack, this cabinet. It's made of wood, but it's on casters, so I can roll it. It really kind of makes it very easy, so when I open this, there's going to be a little bit more noise. I'll try to cut some of that out. But it's really just got this thing Velcroed to the front. But it does help with the noise a little bit. It's just a thin piece of plywood. But inside of here is really my server rack, I guess you'd say. So along the bottom here, I've just got a bunch of extra spare hard drives that I can, use for different things. Most of them are pretty small drives. They're old. They've got old data on them that either I've backed it up already or I don't care about it, one or the other. Up on the top, I've got keyboards and mice that I can pull out if I need to use a separate keyboard or mouse for anything, for any reason. I've got that stuff there. And then on each of the other three racks, I've got a server. So I am the type of person that I will not just go buy something willy-nilly, especially when it costs a few $100s to thousands of dollars. So this server here, I saved up for over a year. Is about $1,000 on eBay. Used. It had no drives. It just had the 2 cores, or the 2 CPU sockets. It came with CPUs with 12 cores each, so that's 24 total cores, but then that gets split into 48 threads, so it looks like 48 cores really. And then these are all 2.5-inch drive slots. There's 4 on the back and then all of these on the front. All the ones with lights on have drives in them. The rest are just placeholders. And then I've got 4 in the back. These are all 500 gig and 1 terabyte SSD drives. And then up on top, in the back here, is a little, I'll kind of show it to you, is that little drive there, and it's got 4 3.5-inch drives in it. And then you can just see my generic switch right there coming out of the wall. That's just the switch that splits up the signal between the different servers and the gaming rigs and all the stuff here in my office. And then you can see I've got a couple of other boxes with some dumb switches that I don't even have hooked up right now. And then there's that laptop with just a keyboard and stuff sitting on it that I used to use for a server. But when you look at these servers, so this top one is the one that I saved up for, and I didn't buy it right away. I took a little break before I bought it and thought about it pretty hard for a while, but then I thought, I do this for YouTube. I use these services that I'm putting up. So this is kind of my production server, and this is the server that in my videos, if you see it, it's named Aria. This is my testing server, so I was very fortunate that I had a really cool viewer who contacted me and said, hey, I've got some extra servers that I'm not needing right now. I wanted to get rid of them, but I wanted to see if you needed them. I said, sure. So we came up with a deal. We both drove about 2.5 hours to meet up and trade it up, so that was great. But yeah, I got this one from him, and it's kind of my testing server. So this one's a little bit older than this one up here, but it does pretty well. It's still got plenty of power to do what I need for testing and things like that. And then I usually show you guys how I build it in the videos on my production server, and a lot of that stuff stays running as I've shown you in the last few videos. And then this one here on the bottom is one that he had also that I've put together, and it's got 3.5-inch drives on it. And I use this as my NAS. So this is true NAS scale running on this server. And then I've got these drives set up, and they are running with ZFS pools set up, and then also RAID on the actual Dell hardware setup. So I've got a mirrored setup, plus they've got ZFS pools that are running, so everything's getting kind of redundantly backed up. Now this is all local, so the piece that I'm missing is cloud storage today. I don't really have a good backup to a cloud location other than my photos on my phone go up to iCloud automatically, which is fine. I don't really have any other kind of cloud backups for all of my data and stuff, which is not great. So I've been shopping around trying to find somebody that I like and somebody that I trust their service and that I trust them with my data. And it's a really hard sell for me at this point. So I'm still kind of working through that, but when I have a solution, of course, I'll let you guys know what it is. And it'd be great if I could find a company who uses open source for that, because that would just make me happy, being the open source advocate. But yeah, this is kind of my setup today from the hardware standpoint. My networking hardware, I use pfSense and I use OpenWRT and DDWRT on my hotspots, and I've shown that in other videos, so you can kind of go back and check those out. But yeah, I'm slowly working my network out so that it's got some better capabilities and splitting that out into VLANs and things like that. You know, it's funny because when I first got a network router of my own, it was a WRT54G by Linksys. It was great. It did what I needed it to do, and really nothing more than that. It really just kind of handled a little bit of wireless that wasn't super fast. And then, of course, it handled the local area network. So I'm going to cover this back up just so we don't have the background noise as much. I am eventually going to get like a plexiglass door that actually fits and opens and closes, and that'd be a little bit nicer. Plus, I can see through it, which would be great. But yeah, that's my network. That's my hardware setup. I've got a pretty simple network. I've got my house wired up to some extent at this point. I went through that last year too, just getting everything kind of set. But I'm going to move over to the screen and show you what I've got going on from the actual server pieces so that you can see what I'm running and where I'm running it. But just for reference, the ARIA server is the top server there. That's the one that I saved up for. The BIA server is the second level server. And then my TrueNAS server is that one that was on that third level down. And then the rest of that stuff was just storage space for hard drives, keyboards, mice, things like that I've collected over the years. Alright, so as we look at these things, I've got some tabs open here at the top, and the first one is that ARIA server, that top hardware server that I showed you earlier. And this is really my primary server where I run a lot of my main stuff that I actually want to keep running. So I'm going to zoom this up to make it easier, but it does have a nice dash, so when I'm just looking at the server itself, I can kind of see how things are running. You can see it doesn't use very much resource of what I've got. So if I zoom this up, we can look at this top level little dash right here, and you can really see kind of what's happening. So in the RAM usage, I've got 256 gigs of RAM. Now I bought it that way, so I'm only using a little over 100 gigs right now. So unused RAM is wasted RAM, most people say. I like to see it a little below, at least below like 80%, but if it gets above 80%, I start to get nervous, but right now it's sitting great. My CPU usage, as you can see, is very low. So I have 48 CPUs, CPU cores. I have actually 24 CPUs in the server. It's 2 actual CPU dies with 12 cores each, but it sees that in 48 threads, so it counts that as 48 cores. So it gives me plenty to work with. And you can see it goes up and down a little bit here and there. It really just sits unless somebody starts watching something on my media, or I start running backups in the middle of the night, those kind of things. Other than that, it doesn't really do a lot. Even though I run a ton of services for myself, because it's just for me and my family for the most part, I'm not using much of what I have, the capability that I have, which is fine. Again, on the HD space, so you can see here I've got 11 gigabytes used out of 90 gigabytes. Now that's just for the operating system. That is not all of the hard drives on the system, of course. And then here you can see what swap and everything looks like. So pretty simple usage compared to the capability that I've got and what I could really put into this server. Now if I spin up some of my other things, I've got a couple of Windows servers here. You'll see the CPU go up, you'll see the RAM go up pretty drastically because those are full VMs and they use up everything. Same thing with Ubuntu. If I give Ubuntu 16 gigs, it uses up 16 gigs for that full VM. The lighter weight stuff are these containers that I run, these LXC containers, which I really enjoy running. Super lightweight, but I've got my proxy server, so this is what runs like Nginx Proxy Manager and a few other applications like that, and my main Portainer runs on this proxy server. So if I click onto it and you look at the summary of usage, I've given it 4 CPUs and I've given it 4 gigs of RAM, and you can see it's only using about half the RAM, and the CPU usage is pretty much nil. I could drop that down to 1 and probably still be perfectly fine because it's just not doing much. It's really just running some applications that don't have to do a lot in the first place. Swap usage is nothing. And then here's my boot disk size. This one is one that I run all the time. So I run NetMaker as my WireGuard server. and I use that to create my WireGuard networks. And this is my ingress point for my network off of my WireGuard network, NetMaker network, so that when I'm away from home, I have a nice VPN back into my network. I can get in my network and attach to all of my different machines without having to have any kind of special ports open or anything like that. And then finally, I've got my Pi-hole server, and this is just one of them. So this runs Pi-hole for my DNS inside of my network. And then over on my BIA server, I have one as well. So again, if we look at this server, it's a little bit different server. It's a little older. This is an R630, I believe. So not quite the same amount of CPU capability, but I do have 24 threads. It's, I think, a total of six cores on 2 actual CPU sockets. And then that gets doubled to 12. And so 2 times 12 is 24. There you go. And again, I'm using almost nothing of it. The RAM usage, I've got about 64 gigs of RAM, and I'm using 6 or 8 out of it, so almost nothing again. And then hard drive space, you can see what I've got there for the OS. But as we go down and we kind of check out these containers, these LXC containers, it's the same story. So I've got my Pi Alert that runs, and it runs Pi-hole. So this is my second Pi-hole DNS server for redundancy, and it's on a separate physical server. So if I have to reboot one, I still have DNS. And I just don't reboot them at the same time. I'm doing great. For this one, this is my Guacamole server, and so I just set it up in an LXC container, and I liked how I set it up, so I just left it running. It's actually running in Docker on LXC, but it's super minimal, which is great because I'm using 2 CPUs, and again, using nothing of it. I'd need to look at it when I'm actually doing the browsing onto one of my Windows VMs or something, or maybe a couple of them at a time, and see what it does, because I haven't looked at it like that. But again, you can see I've got 25% of 4 gigs, so it's using a gig, and then swap, and again, nothing. Boot disk size is nothing. This one I call base row, so it's got base row on it. I've got a couple of other things that I run on this one. This is an LXC container again, and it's got Docker installed, and I run, I think, about 3 or 4 different applications on it. And I set them up, and they were supposed to be for testing, but then I liked how I set them up, so I just left it here. I just haven't moved them or anything. And then this is one of my actual full-on VMs for Ubuntu, where I run a lot of my testing when I'm initially setting things up just to try it out. And then I've got a Fedora desktop that I set up a while back that I don't turn on most of the time, kind of like the Windows desktops over on this other side. This one is the one that has a ton of storage, and then my TrueNAS server has a ton of storage as well. But first we'll go through this one. So this is where I set up OpenFire for you guys a while back. I've still got it running. I'm still doing some testing with it. I set up my IPA server again. I've been doing some testing with it. I think I'm going to run through the setup again, so I'll probably destroy this one and create it again. But there's still LXC containers that I'm running this stuff on. Then I've got my main Ubuntu Docker server where I run a ton of my applications. I've got this one that was my home assistant for a while. I run it on a separate dedicated machine again now, instead of in this virtual machine. But running in the virtual machine worked really well. I was able to give it a ton of resources, which was great. But then I was able to move it to another physical machine that's a smaller machine. And it runs great still. So I've just kept this because it's a great place to have a backup in case I need to do something. I can pull one of the backups that I made for it and spin it up really quick while I'm working on that physical machine if I have to. This is my secondary Docker server, so I run 2 different Docker servers that are on full Ubuntu VMs, and sometimes you'll see me just logging into one or the other during videos. So I've got probably 40 different Docker containers that I run between these two servers here, not including all the ones that run on LXC containers out there. So yeah, these are 2 different servers that I run there. I've got Neth server that I've been setting up to test with a little bit. I haven't done a ton with it yet, but I'm going to get back to it for sure. And then I've got a Win10 and a Win11 VM that, again, I use for testing, more for work, like my work stuff, than for anything for this. But I can use it for this whenever people ask me about a Windows question that I might be able to answer. I'm not a big Windows user, but I have them there. But you can see I leave a lot of stuff off. I don't run it all the time just because I don't need to run it all the time. Same thing on the BIA server. We kind of talked about that. And on the TrueNAS server, this is really where I back things up to. And you can see here kind of what's going on. So I've got the RAM. I've got 32 gigs of RAM on that server. And I think it's only using about half that, so 16 gigs right now. If I zoom this up, it'll be easier. The CPU is doing literally nothing because I'm not even using it right now. I don't use it for any of the apps or anything like that. I just really use it as a backup NAS for the most part. But yeah, here, so you can see I'm using up 30% of my space, and it says the available space left is 10 terabytes. So I guess I've probably got 12 terabytes or something, maybe 16 terabytes of space that I use for my NAS, and yeah. and then that's redundant, so that's 16 terabytes and I'm using it, and then I've got a redundant storage that it also duplicates everything onto. And then here's my network, and you can see what the network traffic looks like. The nice thing about these R730 XDs from Dell is if you get the right ones, they have two 10 gigabyte NICs and then two 1 gigabyte NICs. So if you plug in your main network to your 10 gigabyte NIC, it's great because you can pass that traffic, and as long as your other hardware can deal with more than 1 gigabyte at a time, if you've got a media server, you've got other things running on there, and you want to have a bunch of parallel things going, the network isn't your bottleneck in that case, which is awesome. So that's one of the things that I do, and I've got some 2.5 gig hardware set up around the house that lets me get at least a little bit more of it. I don't have any 10 gig switches or anything like that, but I've got some 2.5 gig stuff that I've found for fairly inexpensive, and I've done some testing, and it's decent. So yeah, that's kind of my setup. I really just... TrueNAS itself, honestly, I set it up and it runs. I run updates once in a while, but I mean, other than that, it just does its thing. It's like, it's there, it's solid. I just really don't have to mess with it very often. Pretty awesome. Proxmox has been a just superb tool. This thing is incredible. Like, I mean, so great that I'm really considering going and giving like the $100 a year subscription, because I mean, I want them to keep it going. They've been making just steady improvements since I started using it at, a year and a half ago. I really like it. I'm not a full-on expert like a lot of those guys who are like, oh, just go into the back end and do your configuration file stuff. But the UI has gotten so great that I almost never even have to look at that stuff. In fact, I see those articles, I'm like, okay, but where's the instructions for the UI? Because I really have confidence that now you can do a lot of that stuff through the user interface. So yeah, it's been great. I've really liked this. This tool is terrific. I use the community edition on both sides. I've got a dark theme on it just to save your guys' eyes, because I know it can be pretty painful to look at these things whenever you have a light theme on them. Same thing with TrueNAS. So yeah, this is really my setup in my home. And that runs all of the stuff that I've shown you in those last couple of videos where I've talked about all of the open source software that I'm running. I'd say 99% of that runs there on those servers in my home. I have a couple of things that run on a VPS, but really for the most part, it's in my home. So one thing to keep in mind is I've been building up my Homelab for about the last 5 years. I started with very simple hardware. I did not have all of the hardware that you just saw. I really started with just a laptop PC, the one that I showed you up on top of that shelf. And I just used that, and it had a spinning hard drive and it had about 4 gigs of RAM in it, and that was a good start. That was a good starting place for me to just start testing and seeing what I could do with things like Docker and things like containerization, because that really gives you a ton of headroom and space to run a lot of applications on some fairly basic hardware, really. The two servers that I showed you that are virtual machines, those Ubuntu servers, I run a lot of stuff on them, probably total 40 or 45 different services or containers that make up all the applications that I'm using. But I could probably run all of those on one, to be honest. They just don't use that much because I'm a home user. I'm not somebody trying to provide this as a business. Now, if I wanted to provide services as a business, there's a lot more to keep in mind. You need to have not just the servers, but you need to have redundancy built in. And things like Kubernetes are really built for something like that, where you've got clusters of different virtual machines or different machines actually working together in tandem to try to keep your services up and running, so that if one piece goes down, the others, kick in and pick up for that. And if you tell it, hey, I want a minimum of 3 systems running at all times, 3 nodes, Kubernetes is smart enough to know how to kick that in and make it so that if one node goes down, it starts up another one and changes what master node and all those kind of things. So it's a lot of stuff in the background that makes it work. I'm still just digging into Kubernetes and trying to understand it, but if you really want to run a business, you want to have that redundancy because your clients are expecting that software to be up and running. Last night, we happened to have an electrical storm that came through, and it happened to affect the power, and my servers all shut down, and I thought, okay, everything came back up really fast, but I thought, I'm going to turn everything off just to be safe and unplug it until the electrical storm passes. So I was able to do that because this is, again, just for me and my family. This is not really supporting anybody else out there. There's nothing that people are depending on to be up and running other than me and my family who were here in the house with me, and I told them, I'm turning everything off, find something else to do for a while. But if you're doing a business, you need to make sure you've got everything covered. If there's a storm that comes through, you can't just say, hey, sorry, we don't have any power. Hey, we don't have any internet. If the internet goes down, you can't control that if you're not the ISP. But There's a lot of better ways to support others and provide services to other people. So you just need to keep those things in mind. If you're just starting out though, really and truly, just find a machine that you've got laying around. It might be an older machine, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. It's fine. Start with that. Put a Linux distro on it and just start learning about Docker. Start setting up some applications that you want to try and run. Maybe you want to try out Guacamole, where you have RDP access to your machines over the web, but without exposing ports to the internet. Maybe you want to set up Vault Warden and then do some backups of your vault every once in a while and have your own password manager where you're not dependent on somebody else all the time. There's so many different things that you can do that are self-hosted, that are open source, that are out there and available for you to use, and it's just absolutely amazing the amount of things that are available to us. So really on the hardware side of things, it's all about what you want to do. You can start off with a Raspberry Pi and go crazy with Home Assistant. You can just do so many things with a Raspberry Pi. And if you get a Raspberry Pi 4, if you've already got one, you can do some really awesome stuff. The Raspberry Pi Zero W lets you do some pretty incredible stuff as well. And it's a tiny, tiny little board. So definitely on the hardware side, just jump out there and find something you like. I'm going to go out and I'm just going to show you. So I'm going to go to ebay.com here. Let's just see what comes up here, because I have no idea what's going to come up today. Let's see, 256 gigs of RAM. So yeah, I mean, $400 and something. Now it's pre-owned. You need to read, again, always read the details when you're looking for these things. Try to find out, like, is this just for parts? Is there, what's included, what's not included? Really know what to expect when you get it, because yes, I got the server I bought for about $1,000, but then I bought a bunch of hard drives and things like that on sale from Amazon. So I was really kind of set, but it's still that's extra cost. I'd say in the end, for that one top level production server that I run, it was probably $1,600 by the time I was done getting drives and everything else into it that I wanted. If you save up, if this is something you really want to invest in, then you can. Honestly, that Ryzen 3 chip that I've got running in that desktop that I use for gaming with 16 gigs of RAM, I could probably almost run everything I want to right off of that. I'd like a little bit more headroom on the Ethernet ports and things like that, but really, that ran a ton of stuff for me, and it didn't. I mean, the only thing again would be my media server hitting some limitations there, just because there's transcoding happening and stuff like that. So putting in a graphics card, some things like that for your transcoding hardware support would really help you out. But yeah, I mean, it just depends on what you want to do. But that's what I'm running. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really, truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I hope this helped. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.